Nothing to see here. Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop. We are again working on the saw vise, and here you can actually see I have a saw in here, and it's basically a functioning saw vise. Now I can use the vise it's sitting in to work on. I set the saw close to where it is. The cork allows it to fit easily without getting too much movement, and then I can lock it down with this. Now in the future I'm going to be doing a few other things, but today we want to look at putting the cork on, separating the bottom of the vertical so that this can sit nicely in here, and getting it to this kind of a functional state. So let's stop talking and dive in. So I got this pack of cork, and it comes with several sheets and these sticky back stickers, which you don't need those. But it's about 1/4 inch thick. It's actually slightly thinner than that. I got this at the big box store for I think it was like $6. You can get them online for a little cheaper and possibly a little bit thicker. But I want to cut these off at a little bit more than 1 inch. So I don't care that they're straight or parallel. I just need a cut down this. A little bit more than 1 inch, so like 1 inch and 1/8 inch and 1/4, something like that. And I'm going to cut off 3 or 4 strips of this. Now you can get bigger pieces, so you don't have to cut these smaller strips out, so you can get this in a roll that is 48 inches long, but I'm just going to use these. So I'm going to cut off 3 strips and then show you what I do for gluing them on. Next up, I'm going to grab my marking gauge and set the pin about 1 inch away. I haven't measured exactly, but that looks to be about 1 inch. That's all I really need is a strip of leather running along the top here. So I'm going to set it on here, and I'm going to draw that line on there. This line will just make it look a little bit more pretty, so that when I put that on there, I have something to reference it on. For the glue, I'm going to be using hide glue, and I don't use hide glue that much. This is stuff you can fairly get, old brown glue. It's an easy hide glue that you just have to heat up a little bit, and I actually just keep it on this cup warmer in a cup, and it stays warm while I'm using it. That way I don't have to be messing around with a double boiler. And the reason I'm using hide glue as opposed to normal conventional wood glue is that it stays a little bit flexible. This actually becomes kind of brittle. And with the cork, there's going to be a little bit of flexing there. There's going to be a little bit of wiggling. And that will hold very well between the wood and the cork. I'm also going to come in with a stick and just kind of spread it out and flatten it, because there are a lot of voids in the cork that this can work into. Make sure I get it all the way to each edge, all the way along there. And then we can put it in place. And I'm just going to set it on the line and wiggle it down in. That way I can keep it on that same line running all the way along there. Let it overhang a little bit on the top and ends, and then continue on. Second verse, same as the first. And now to clamp a clamp, there's just, yeah, there's a lot in that. I'm going to put it here in the vise and squeeze these together, clamp it down, let it sit overnight, and we're ready to go on to the next step. One of the big reasons for that cork in there is so that when you use a back saw, it sits in there and this will clamp the plate, but still allow the back to move around. Even with the big Veritas saws, there's still a little bit of room in there for the back of that to fit through. These end up being a good bit thicker than traditional brass backs, so you need about a 1/2 inch gap in there. I have a little bit less than a 1/2 inch gap, so when I slide the Veritas saws with this one all the way in, it still works, but if I go it a little farther, it'll be a bit too tight. So this is like the bare minimum. So that's why I got the cheap cork here. But you may want to get a little bit better cork than the stuff I got. Now the next thing we need to do is figure out the gap in between these two verticals. And I want to keep this line fairly parallel. If anything, I want the bottom of it here to be a little bit wider so that it pinches up at the front. But I wanted to wait on making the spacer that goes down at the bottom until I found out precisely what this measurement is. Now I could have mathematically figured that out from the plans, and the plans call for 1.5 inch gap because you have 1/2 inch from the cork, a 1/2 inch from one side, and a 1/2 inch from the other side. Well, if you remember, I actually moved my shoulder from these half laps down a little farther, so the measurement there is a little bit different. So if I put 1.5 inch block in here, now I'm right about where I want to be actually, because my cork is a little bit thinner than it was in the plans, and my shoulder is a little bit larger, so the two of them equal out. 1.5 inches is about the right gap all the way across. Now, I may end up making it slightly thicker than 1.5 inches, just to make it a little bit wider up here and kind of toe tip when it clamps the plate. but we'll see when I get there. So 1.5 inches is the thickness I'm going to shoot for, so that I have an even gap around here. Don't make your spacer until you put this all together and actually measure what your gap is on your piece. So to make that spacer, I have these extra scraps of hickory here. These are a little bit thinner than the stock I'm using. They're actually slightly thinner than 7/8. So they're not quite 3/4, but I put them together and they're a little larger than 1.5 inches, which is right about where I want to be. So I'm probably going to clamp them together and then plane down a little bit and bring the thickness down to exactly where I want it. So what I'm going to do is just clamp these together so that I have a block that I can work with, and then I can cut them apart and make the spacers I need to. So let's glue these up, squeeze them together, and move on. So now we can go about squeezing the tartars out of this thing. And one of the nice things about these wooden clamps is that you can actually keep them parallel so that you get an even pressure all the way across your face, which in this instance can be kind of important. Just going to take a little bit to line these up exactly. Clamp them down. Okay, so we now have this, and I pulled it out of the clamps. It's one solid piece that is slightly over 1.5 inches thick. And basically what I want to do is take this block, cut it in half, and then use one of these at the bottom of each of the verticals. So let's figure out, I don't know exactly how long this is. I don't really care. Right now, let me use this side, it'll be a little easier. It is just shy of 6 1/4. So let's go 3 1/8. Draw a line on that. And this doesn't have to be precise. There's nothing about it that makes any major difference other than appearance, functionality, and how you feel about your woodworking. So let's do it from this side. Now that I have this line on here, we can cut it, have 2 blocks, and then we can attach these to the bottoms of the verticals. Sha-sha, 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 oops, sha-sha, 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 sha. Now, to attach these blocks in, what I've basically done is I leveled out this, put some shims under the far side here, and I'm going to then draw 3 pegs through into this block. Do I need to do that? No. Do I want to do it? Yep. So I can set that up there. The hold fast holds it in place so it doesn't wiggle around. I'll drill 3 holes, drive in 3 pegs, and call it good. Then, just as before, with them staying in place, add a little bit of glue and drive them in. Then to bore the holes through on the other side, what I actually want to do is make sure that everything lines up, but not up here at the legs. I want to make sure everything lines up here at the jaw, because I want the jaw all the way across the bottom to be flat and to have ends at the same point, so that I give a nice clean spot. When I flip this over, the top of the jaw is what matters, which right now is on the bottom. So I line these up, I'm going to drill my holes and peg these, and we'll move on. Now on the back side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bore through the plate. I'm just going to put 1 peg on the back side, and I want this hole to be nice and tight, but I want this hole to be bigger. So what I'm going to do is grab the next step up in brace bits, a 1/16 of an inch larger, and I'm going to drill this with the larger hole. What that does is it gives it a location pin, so the pin will stay in the other jaw, but we'll be able to fit into this. This way in the future, if I want to take these 2 jaws apart and do something on the inside, I can do that. And they're just loosely fit together, so there's a little bit of adjustment and slop if I need that. So now that I have that location hole from the first bit, I'm going to come in with the second bit and bore out a bigger hole. Just going down an inch or so. Nothing major, just enough to hold a pin so it doesn't wiggle around too much. So now in the second jaw, I just have these locating pins that go into slightly larger holes, so that in the future when I want to take this apart, I can, but they're close enough in location that there isn't that much slop in this. It lines up pretty quickly. That way, the screws that will be going through these will be holding these 2 pieces together, but these location pins will just keep this so that the top doesn't move that much. And I can make the fine adjustments once it's standing up in the vise. So now you can kind of get an idea of how this works. Fits into that, and then these stretchers will then sit on the bench top so that it's always at the same height, so I can work at it very close to eye level up here. The other nice thing about this is I don't even have to put in the screws that clamp this together. I can just leave it the way it is. I fit the saw in there, and then I can use the vise itself to crank down on the saw and get it really darn close. The nice thing in the future is having those in there, I can just do a little bit more tweaking if I want it tighter on one side or the other, or I want to close up a little gap over here, I can do that with the screws that I'll be putting in later. So it is basically a functioning saw vise. We still have to do a few more things. We have to put in the nut and screw that will clamp this together and make it a separate standing saw vise. Number two, we have to then chamfer down the edges and get this at a 45-degree angle so that when working on this, we can also then still put in a bit of pitch onto each of the teeth if we desire. And then it's finishing, and we'll basically be done. So I think I'm going to have two more videos. One, putting these screws, making the screw and nut, and two, doing all the finishing touches needed to make this functional. And then we will have a working saw vise. So now I can go through here one at a time. My face is very close to the teeth, so I can work all the way along this thing and let my arm rest over it and get all the way down to the end without having any functional issue here. I'm really liking how this is coming together. It's really solid, so there's very little movement on here. I'm looking forward to using it. There you have it. I'm really liking how this is coming together. I have a few more things I want to do on it, but I'm very pleased and looking forward to using this quite a bit in the future, and actually probably putting out several videos on sharpening saws in this. So I hope you liked this video. It was a fun one for me. I do want to say thank you to the patrons. You guys are the reason why I can keep doing this. I have a couple videos coming up that I'm going to be spending a lot of money on to really get in some high quality informational content, and you patrons on Patreon are the reason why I can do that. If you'd like to find out with that or help out with Patreon, you can do that right down there. Also, if you'd like to subscribe and see some behind the scenes footage, you can do that as well. That's about it for today, and until next time, have a wonderful day.